Coming up, State of Business, sponsored by
Stay well connected at home or on the go with SLT Mobitel.
IWS Aviation.
Good evening and welcome to the State of Business on our television. I'm Senra Gunawardana and let's have a look at the headlines. Government pursues renewable energy goals. Export sector calls for robust policies to support operations. News in detail. An extraordinary gazette was issued last night declaring the supply of electricity, services, work or labour of any description whatsoever required to be done in connection with the healthcare sector as an essential service. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa issued the new Gazette 2283/33 by virtue of the powers vested in him by Section 2 of the Essential Public Services Act 61 of 1979. The decision was taken after considering it necessary that the services provided by any public, government, local, cooperative entity which is engaged in provision of the services specified in the schedule is essential to the life of the community and is likely to be impeded or interrupted. Meanwhile, the Ceylon Electricity Board Engineers Union decided to launch an indefinite strike from midnight yesterday based on 4 demands, including the immediate withdrawal of the proposed amendments to the CEB Act. The 4 demands include the withdrawal of proposed amendments to Sri Lanka Electricity Act 20 of 2009, gazetted on 29th April, halt the handover of wind and solar resources to Adani Group without a competitive bidding process, end the privatization of the CEB in the guise of reform, and to appoint a suitable professional to the post of chairman. Despite this opposition, Power and Energy Minister Kanchana Wijesekara presented the amendments in Parliament today. They are expected to pave the way for the swift approval and implementation of long-delayed renewable power projects. The CEB trade union claims the amendments without proper and adequate consultation with all relevant stakeholders will undermine the competitive bidding process for procurement of private sector electricity. However, Minister Wijesekara holds that the renewable energy power projects are a vital component for the development of low-cost, uninterrupted power generation capabilities. Speaking in Parliament yesterday, Minister Wijesekara affirmed that he will not table the Ceylon Electricity Board's request to increase tariffs by 300% before the Cabinet, as the state utility is not fully supportive of renewable energy.
මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුව නියෝජනය කරන ඔබතුමන්ලා ආණ්ඩු පක්ෂයේ ඉන්නෙද්දිත් මේ යෝජනාව ගේන්න උත්සාහ කරා. හැබැයි ඒ අවස්ථාවෙත් විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයේ එක්තරා සීමිත කොටසක්. මම කියන්නේ අද විපක්ෂ නායකතුමා කියනවා විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයේ ඉන්න සියලුම සේවකයන් මේකට විරුද්ධයි කියලා. නෑ සියලුම සේවකයන් විරුද්ධ නෑ. මේකේ විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයේ එන්ජිනියරෝ කීප දෙනෙක් පමණයි මේකට විරුද්ධ. අද අපිට දැනුවත් කරනවා මේ ඩීසල් බලාගාර වෙනුවෙන් පෙනී ඉන්න පහුගිය කාලේ මේ පුනර්ජනීය බලශක්ති ව්‍යාපෘති ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න නොදීපු. ඒ නිසා මම කැබිනට් ඇමතිවරයා හැටියට ගරු කතානායකතුමනි තීන්දුවක් ගත්තා විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයේ පසුගිය සතියේ මගෙන් ඉල්ලීමක් කරා 300කින් විදුලි බිල වැඩි කරන්න කියලා. ඇයි විදුලි උත්පාදන වියදම රුපියල් බිලියන 756යි අපිට ලැබෙන්නේ රුපියල් බිලියන 250යි. රුපියල් බිලියන 500ක් තියෙනවා හිඟයක්. හැබැයි වැඩිපුර මුදලක් යන්නේ මොනවටද? මේ ඩීසල් බලාගාර වලට ඉන්ධන මිල දී ගැනීම සඳහා යන මුදලත් මේ නිලධාරීන්ගේ වැටුප් වලට යන වියදම් හැම අවුරුදු 3කට සැරයක්ම නිලධාරීන්ගේ වැටුප 125කින් වැඩි වෙනවා 125කින්. එතකොට මේ වැඩි වෙන වැටුප් වලට ගෙවන්න ඕන මේ ඉන්ධන බිල ජනතාව මත දාලාද? නෑ ජනතාව මත දාලා නෙමෙයි. මම පැහැදිලිව කියනවා එවැනි යෝජනාවක් කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයට මම ගේන්න කටයුතු කරන්නේ නෑ කියලා. අද සූදානම් නැත්නම් විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයේ ඉන්න නිලධාරීන් විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයේ ඉන්න නිලධාරීන් සූදානම් වෙන්න ඕන උත්පාදන වියදම අඩු කරන්න. අද උත්පාදන වියදම අඩු කරන්න පුනර්ජනීය බලශක්ති ව්‍යාපෘතිය අවහිර කරලා තමන්ගේ වැටුප් වැඩි කර ගැනීම වෙනුවෙන් තමන්ගේ වැටුප් ගෙවා ගැනීම වෙනුවෙන් ජනතාව මත ඒ ගාස්තු සංශෝධනය කළ දාන්න හදනවා නම් ඒකට කිසිසේත්ම මම ඇමතිවරයා හැටියට කටයුතු කරන්න ඉඩ දෙන්නේ නැහැ කියන එක අපි කියනවා.
The Colombo District Court today issued an enjoining order preventing the Ceylon Electricity Board Engineers Union, its office bearers and its members from disrupting the supply of electricity to the general public. Meanwhile, Chairman of Public Utilities Commission Janaka Ratnayaka said that the trade union action by the Ceylon Electricity Board United Trade Union Alliance is illegal. The Commission will take action against all who engaged in inconvenience in the general public.
යුනියන් එකේ තියෙන ඉල්ලීම් ගැන අපි කතා කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඉල්ලීම් මම දැන් 60ක් 70ක් වගේ සාධාරණ ඉල්ලීම් තියෙන්නේ. ඒකට හැබැයි අනිත් එක අපිට කියන්න ඕනේ මේ යුනියන් එකට මොකද මහජන විපිතා කොමිසමෙන් තමයි තීරණය කරන්නේ මේ එක එක සමාගම් වලට එක එක නීතියට පටහැනිව අන්සොලිසිටඩ් බිඩ්ස් ගෙනල්ලා ඇග්‍රීමන්ට් ගැහුවට අන්තිමේට මහජන විපිතා කොමිසමෙන් තමයි තීරණය කරන්නේ අපි ඒ ලයිසන්ස් දෙනවද නැද්ද කියලා. ඒ අනුව අපිට තීරණය ගන්න පුළුවන් ඒ ලයිසන් එක අපිට ඔෆෝඩ් කරන්න බැයි නම් ඒක නීතියට පටහැනි නම් අපි කවදාවත් අවසර දෙන්න අපිට පුළුවන් අපිට බලය තියෙනවා. කිසිම දෙයක් අපි හිතනවා නම් මේක අපේ long term generation plan එකට අදාළ නොවන least cost principle එකට ඒ කියන්නේ අඩුම වියදමින් පිරිවැයෙන් අපිට මේක විදුලිය ලබා ගන්න බැයි නම් මහජන විපිතා කොමිසම කිසිම අවස්ථාවක අවසර දෙන්නේ නැහැ. මහජනතාවට කිසිම අනීතබියක් ඇති කරගන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. ඒ වගේ අවස්ථාවක් ඇති වුණොත් එහෙම අපි කවදාවත් ඒකට අවසර දෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ අනුව අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන් හැබැයි මේ trade union action ගන්නකොට මහජනතාවට කරදරයක් නොවන ආකාරයට තමන්ගේ ඉල්ලීම් දිනා ගැනීමට අවශ්‍ය කටයුතු කරන කියන එක අපි ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. එයාට පුළුවන් නම් මේ සරන් හරි අඳන් ඇවිල්ලා මේ සීබේක ඉස්සරහා ඔළුවෙන් හිටගෙන ස්ට්‍රයික් කරත් PCS වල කිසිම ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. හැබැයි විදුලිය කපන්න නැතුව පැය 24 පුරාම මේ බ්ලැක් අවුට් ගැන කතා කරන්නේ නැතුව නීති විරුද්ධ දේවල් කරන්නේ නැතුව ඕන දෙයක් කරන්න අපේ සහයෝගය ලැබෙනවා.
With the developments of the day, Ceylon Electricity Board engineers who went on a strike action over 4 key demands suspended their trade union action following talks with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. However, Public Utilities Commission Chairman Janaka Ratnayaka added that the PUCSL will take action as they need to make sure that these kind of short-sighted activities do not occur in the future.
We can take two actions in this scenario. One is to go under this Essential Public Service Act number 61 of 1979, or we can activate a public hearing under the PCSL Act of 2002. In the PCSL Public Hearing Act, we can bring all these culprits before us, and under oath we can ask what went wrong. Then based on our recommendations, we can go to the court. Now, so I said that Supreme Court said that you do a public hearing and come back to us with your recommendation that they will help us to implement that. We can issue an enforcement order also, which we are immediately doing it. We will have an enforcement order because there are licenses. Now say CB may be the biggest organization with 22,000 people, but they are operating on our license. So license has its own conditions. The prime condition of the license is not to disrupt the electricity. So they have disrupted electricity. Therefore, we are going to give an enforcement order to the license holder, that is the general manager of CB today. I think we are looking at all the options, and we will see how they will react within maybe couple of days. Since they are barred from engaging into trade union activities for next 2 weeks, we need to wait and see their moves. But we need to make sure that after 2 weeks that they will also not resort to the same action again, where it will disrupt millions of people in this country.
Stay tuned, we will return after this commercial break. While the government has announced debt forgiveness plans for small-scale and household farmers, the central bank may also announce payment holidays for parties affected by the economic crisis. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe this week told Parliament that the central bank is currently assessing which parties deserve support on their loans. Following the assessment, the central bank will announce the parties and groups that are entitled to apply for moratoria. The tourism sector is at the forefront of those who expect an extension, as its moratorium ends on June 30th. Meanwhile, those who engage in the passenger transport sector could also come under a new moratorium as their daily income has collapsed due to the fuel shortage. The private bus owners this week announced they would reduce operations by 80% due to fuel shortage. A majority of these buses are on leases. Three-wheeler drivers would also seek assistance as they could not provide taxi rides as more than half their time is spent in queues for petrol. Sri Lanka has nearly 1.5 million three-wheelers. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, in his capacity as the Finance Minister, has recently requested the International Monetary Fund Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva to expedite the process of staff-level agreement, which would then pave the way for the rescue package at least by September. The rescue package in the form of an extended fund facility is one where any bailout money is tied to tough austerity and serious problems in the fiscal and state sectors. Sri Lanka is looking for about $3 billion from the IMF, which will come in multiple tranches within a period of at least 3 years. However, a deal with the IMF will reopen avenues to access other multilateral and bilateral funds by the way of bridge financing. While Sri Lanka is fast running out of cash for fuel and coal under the Indian line of credit, the Premier holds that apart from India, no other country or multilateral agency supports Sri Lanka to secure fuel and coal, although they may provide humanitarian assistance in the form of food, medicine and fertilizer. Therefore, he requests everyone to avoid creating any major disruptions in the country, as this could cause a complete cessation of assistance from the rest of the world. The local export sector reiterated the need for Sri Lanka to have robust policies to continue local operations and sustain global markets. To ensure the sectors are given due emphasis, the National Chamber of Exporters recently met with Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe to share their concerns and grievances. During the meeting, the National Chamber of Exporters presented a set of proposals that could help ease current issues. In the proposals shared with the Premier, the first request was to ensure uninterrupted power and fuel supply to exporters. The NCE urges authorities to impose power cuts after 4 p.m. and to allow the purchasing of large barrels of fuel for industrial use and the streamlining of fuel distribution. A mandatory ruling for exporters to remit export proceeds to the country within 180 days was emphasized. Streamlining the mechanism exporters employ to use export proceeds to import raw materials required for production was also proposed. As exporters are struggling to enter new and non-traditional markets, one proposal was to direct foreign missions to appoint commercial officers to promote exports and generate monthly progress reports. To support the SME sector and help them expand, the Chamber urged the Prime Minister to establish a concession scheme via Sri Lanka Export Credit Insurance Corporation to limit the risks of defaults. Emphasis was also placed on rescheduling special loans issued during the COVID-19 pandemic, as exporters are facing difficulties in repayment due to the economic downturn. The NCE has proposed that the Finance Ministry provide relief to SME exporters affected by the present situation. This includes providing additional working capital requirements at 3 to 4% interest for at least a period of 12 months under a new debt moratorium, rescheduling non-performing loans, extending debt moratorium assistance for lease and overdraft facilities. With the forex shortage, the Chamber suggests allowing enterprises to sell 50% or more of production capacity locally to buy dollars from exporters to import raw materials. The proposals highlighted the inability to sell products on e-commerce platforms due to government restrictions on online fund transfer methods such as PayPal. Among other proposals, the NCE urged authorities and policymakers to consult exporters or trade chamber on export-related matters before making decisions. The World Bank recently slashed its global growth forecast by nearly a third to 2.9% for 2022, warning that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has compounded the damage from the COVID-19 pandemic and many countries now face recession. The war in Ukraine had magnified the slowdown in the global economy, which is now entering a protracted period of feeble growth and elevated inflation, the World Bank said in its Global Economic Prospects report, warning that the outlook could still grow worse. In a news conference, World Bank President David Malpass said global growth could fall to 2.1% in 2022 and 1.5% in 2023, driving per capita growth close to zero if downside risks materialized. Malpass said global growth was being hammered by the war, fresh COVID lockdowns in China, supply chain disruptions and the rising risk of stagflation, a period of weak growth and high inflation last seen in the 1970s. Subdued growth will likely persist throughout the decade because of weak investment in most of the world. Inflation is now at multi-decade highs in many countries and supply is expected to grow slowly. There is a risk that inflation will remain higher for longer. Between 2021 and 2024, the pace of global growth is projected to slow by 2.7%, Malpass said, more than twice the deceleration seen between 1976 and 1979. While there were similarities to conditions back then, there were also important differences, including the strength of the US dollar and generally lower oil prices, as well as generally strong balance sheets at major financial institutions. To reduce risks, Malpass said policymakers should work to coordinate aid for Ukraine, boost production of food and energy, and avoid export and import restrictions that could lead to further spikes in oil and food prices. He also called for efforts to step up debt relief, warning that some middle-income countries were potentially at risk, strengthen efforts to contain COVID, and speed the transition to a low-carbon economy. The bank forecast a slump in global growth to 2.9% in 2022 from 5.7% in 2021, and said growth was likely to hover near the level in 2023 and 2024. Growth in advanced economies was projected to decelerate sharply to 2.6% in 2022 and 2.2% in 2023. US growth was seen dropping to 2.5% in 2022. Emerging market and developing economies were seen achieving growth of just 3.4% in 2022, well below the annual average of 4.8% seen between 2011 and 2019. Negative spillovers from the war in Ukraine would offset near-term boosts reaped by commodity exporters, with 2022 growth forecasts revised down in nearly 70% of emerging markets and developing economies. South Asia would see growth of 6.8% this year and 5.8% in 2023. Stay tuned for stock updates.
Stay well connected at home or on the go with SLT Mobitel.
Now you can buy your ultra-fast fiber connection online through sltmobitel.lk and get special discounts.
Biz Roundup.
Trading at Colombo Stock Exchange ended on positive notes today. The all-share price index gained 108.44 points to close at 7,881.13, and the S&P SL20 gained 38.65 points to close at 2,567.74. The turnover was 0.9 billion rupees and over 46 million shares were traded. Up next are forex rates. That's all our news for today. Take care and good night.
State of Business was sponsored by
Stay well connected at home or on the go with SLT Mobitel.
IWS Aviation.